Come back. President Cyril Ramaphosa has told China's Xi Jinping on Monday that he wanted to narrow our country's trade deficit with Beijing. This is days before the Chinese leader is due to urge a summit of 50 African countries or nations to buy more Chinese goods. So, what is that all about? And if Cyril Ramaphosa is very firm in this request, will there be any ramifications for us as South Africa as far as trade relations with China is concerned? Let's get Professor Garth Pere from the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. He is the senior associate there, and his insights on this opening question. A very good morning to you. I do hope I've pronounced your institute's name correctly.
Yes, you have. I'm also associated with the University of Pretoria, so that's fine as an
Perfect.
introduction. Yeah,
You should have given me the easier one.
the context here is important because President Ramaphosa and his large delegation of about 10 cabinet ministers are in China for the ninth iteration of the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation. But embedded, in that important engagement is also to discuss our bilateral relations, South Africa's bilateral relations with China, but with a particular focus, on trying to recalibrate and correct the imbalances and asymmetries in our trade relationships, which is of particular concern. Let us remember that South Africa now enjoys 25 years of bilateral relations with China since 1998. So there is concern that, we buy more from China than China buys from us, and hence this trade imbalance. So the problems are structural in nature, primarily because the South African economy has not grown at the rate and despite the potential, the manifest potential in the economy to grow at a much larger trajectory. Let us, also remember that South Africa is stuck in a low growth trap. GDP growth for last year was like 0.6%, which is down from the 1.9% in 2022. So, if you take this from a rational point of view, and in terms of trade realpolitik, what is there that attracts China to South Africa? China is a rational investor in terms of production opportunities, trade and investment. And let us also then emphasize that there is overcapacity in the Chinese economy as far as production and manufacturing is concerned. It has a surplus of trade that it is trying to export to other countries. So in terms of South Africa's competitive and comparative advantages, it cannot compete with China in global markets, let alone in the African market. So there has to be a quid pro quo for China to invest in South Africa, to increase its own productive footprint in South Africa, in particular with regard to investing in strategic sectors of the South African economy, in mining, in production, in manufacturing, in ICT, particularly in sort of the new frontiers, which is the green energy transition, where China does have great experience and competitive and comparative advantages. And I think that is one of the areas that President Ramaphosa will take up with the Chinese leadership, especially in improving our logistics and infrastructure networks, which, as you know, have been severely affected, in the post-COVID period, but also in the context of, 10 years of economic decline, fueled and propelled by state capture, and so on.
You've actually preempted my second question. You've answered that regarding investment by China in South Africa, because they've done so in other parts of Africa and other third world countries. That would then create better trade relations between the two countries if they, like you've indicated, invested perhaps in our infrastructure, which I believe is really very sorely needed, and they have the expertise to assist us to uplift all of those areas. That being said, and you have actually answered that question, we understand that other Western countries are curbing on Chinese exports, such as solar panels and, of course, electric vehicles, and that, of course, is on the horizon. So finding buyers for such items, perhaps the US and the European Union, they maintain Beijing has overcapacity in its top priority for the Chinese leader. It's exactly what you've said as well. They have the manpower, they have the expertise, they have the intelligence, and that is why they are overproducing. They probably have reached a situation of they're sitting with a glut of all of these products, and they need to get rid of it, and they're looking to Africa, and particularly here in South Africa. If we don't buy in to all of that they want to dump, excuse the expression, onto South Africa, is it going to hurt our relations at all?
Well, I think this is where, President Ramaphosa and his delegation, uh, the delegation consists of 10 cabinet ministers in strategic areas of the government of national unity. So it's, international relations, science and technology, agriculture, and so on. So these are all areas, that need a serious injection of new investment, new forms of generating, greater capacity for the economy. So I would imagine that the Chinese have the necessary experience um, uh, to bring the kind of managerial skills to South Africa. And it's very important to recall, that South Africa is probably, as far as I'm aware, the only country in Africa that has a comprehensive strategic partnership with China. And from that strategic partnership, there is what is called a 10-year strategic program for cooperation, which runs from 2020 to 2029. So the next period of the GNU over the next 5 years will be very important in terms of giving traction, to that program for cooperation, as far as South Africa identifies and highlights what China can do through this cooperation agenda in uplifting the economy. That's the one thing. The other thing is also to bring in the Africa dimension. And here, the African Continental Free Trade Area provides a strategic opportunity for this partnership, insofar as this overcapacity that China has can be readily absorbed on the supply side by the Continental Free Trade Agreement, as far as, for example, enabling the green energy transition, improving the capacity of ports, railways, and roads to function better for connectivity reasons, and also, enlarging the footprint for ICT on the digital economy, which is another very important aspect, both for our economy and for the efficacy and the effectiveness of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So, just discarding the ability of China to export to other regions of the world, I think, given the capacity constraints in Africa, there is the absorptive capacity among the African countries, maybe to integrate what China has to offer in terms of the overcapacity in production, in manufacturing, in goods trade, as well as services. Like South Africa, let us emphasize that African economies are overwhelmingly oriented towards services, and that will really be the impetus for driving the next phase of our economic growth as well as that of African economies. So there's great opportunities for greater synergy and partnership, notwithstanding the challenges that lay in our own economic future, as well as that for the next phase of Africa's economic development in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the Agenda 2063 pilot programs, which essentially are oriented to addressing Africa's supply side deficits and constraints in infrastructure, in human capital, in management, in connectivity, and so on.
Professor, to end the interview then, are you confident that the Chinese government will hear us, the delegation under Cyril Ramaphosa, and that these talks could go forward with positive outcomes for both countries, South Africa and China?
Well, I think one has to accept the bona fides of the Chinese. If you compare it with Western initiatives, such as in the European Union's economic partnership agreements, the Americans' Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. If you look at the calculus of benefits between them and what China has brought to the table in terms of the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation since 2000, right? So it's, what is it, 24 years of institutional engagement between the two sides, with great commitments and benefits which have flowed from that, albeit not always, based on the pledges. But I think if you do a cost-benefit analysis, China's contribution to Africa's development over the last 24 years has been much more substantial than 50 years of engagement between the European Union and the United States. And we should also mention, the other huge agenda item, which is China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is also making a huge difference. And this at a time, when the Chinese economy is somewhat in a lethargic state, after the COVID pandemic and so on. But it is recovering as China recalibrates its economy towards, high-end technology, the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, higher levels of digitalization. And it has the capability now of exporting 85 million manufacturing jobs, where the African continent, could be a ready receptacle for that, which will also drive the next phase, not only of South Africa's industrial development, but also that of the continent.
Let's leave it there and let's be hopeful that our delegation under Cyril Ramaphosa comes back home with very, very positive news for this partnership with China and amazing assistance and support regarding our infrastructure and also creating jobs within South Africa, because that, of course, is sorely needed here. Professor Garth Pere, thank you indeed for your insights. Go well.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
It is exactly 8:51 a.m. News and Views. Moving along, our next guest is the CEO of We Solve 4X, and that is Tsitsi Ngubesi.